Going to take a look at adding in additional crop types for Farming Simulator 2019. Quite a lot has changed, for good or worse, can't really say. I would probably say certain parts are easier and other parts are not more difficult, just very time consuming. Your foliage is now changed slightly the way it's set up because we have these new LOD diffuse channels and normal channels for the different growth stages, which I've created these myself. The actual normals I used Maize, so I just cheated a little bit and took the same normals that are used for Maize from the in-game installation folder, but the actual diffuse ones I have actually used, or I've created my own, and all I've done there is taken this diffuse, which was from a map in Farm Sim 17, and I've then cut out the individual growth stages. So I've just used the rectangle select tool, taken whatever, so growth stage 1, taken that, and then created a new texture image and pasted it in its appropriate positions. And then when I've done that one, I've taken growth stage 2 and done the same, growth stage 3, 4 and 5, which then gives me my 5 LODs at their different growth stages. So that's probably one of the more time consuming things. Took me a couple of attempts to get that right, but you know, in the end I got there. So this would need to be done for all of your additional foliage layers, crop types, and then I've taken the distance diffuse. Again, this was from a 17 map, just going to use the same ones, but you will also need an acre fine distance diffuse. This will be shared across all of your additional crop types. So if you've got 13 or 14 different additional crop types, then they will all use this single acre fine diffuse, but obviously your distance channels will be specific to the crop type that you're going to bring in. So yeah, there's not really much more to do there. So once you've got all of that set up and it's in its own i3D, you will then need to obviously have some kind of XML, which is going to load all the appropriate parts in for the different growth stages and their different distance channels and whatever else, and so on and so on. So you need to make sure that all of that is set up correctly. And also at the top here we have our path file name to the distance texture, so that needs to be set up correctly. Your wherever you've got your distance textures located, that needs to be put into there. Because I've got my distance textures in the same folder as the XML, theoretically it should look literally directly in there. It shouldn't need to look anywhere else, so that should be okay. I can leave that as it is. But I have found for 19 there is some weirdness going on with path file names, because some XMLs will need to be extremely specific, so you will have to put in, like for example where I am at the moment in this folder, it's not so bad, but if I'm in my maps folder and I then put that at one of these into here and then want to link things together, I would actually have to put maps/foliage/hops.xml or .i3d or whatever else. So you have to be a bit careful with your path file names, and again, like I've shown in previous videos with the default items, some of these path file names are a bit weird in the way that looks for things. So it seems like every single XML I look at has a different way of actually locating the appropriate file. It's weird how that's set up, but you know, just a little bit of messing around, and look at your log text, which should give you an indication of where you've gone wrong, because it will say it's failed to load a certain thing under a certain path file name, and you just need to recheck it and perhaps maybe adjust it slightly. But so yeah, there's our XML. So we need to obviously get that loaded into the map somehow. Where we would in 17 actually load all of the foliage textures directly into the map i3D, that is not required anymore. The map looks at this XML here and then loads all the appropriate parts from this i3D, so it's kind of linked in together that way now. So slight differences, again, some a little easier, and some harder, and some just more time consuming. however you want to look at it. So what I'm going to do is open up my sample mod map here of Ravenport, and I'm just going to take all of these parts here and then just basically bring them into this folder. So we'll do like so. And I've set up all the particle systems for the cutter effect, the effect map material holder, which is your unloading and things like that, and belt and leveler and whatever else. And I've also included some particle material holders, which is like your cutter effects, smoke effects, additional smoke effects and things like that, which I think just adds a little bit more to it, in my opinion. So there's a fair few things there that needs to be set up. And then obviously with the fill planes, this also does require a distance channel. And then you've got your HUDs. Again, all of this stuff I've taken from a 17 map that had hops on it, and I've just adjusted it to make it work with 19. So if we open up the map US i3D, yours may be called something different, and then I'm going to do a search for materials, the bottom of the materials section, as I always did in 17, and we'll just scroll down and we come to the actual foliage layer section. So here what I need to do is create a new line in the foliage layer section here, and I've based this around Maize to a degree, so I'm going to make a copy of the Maize line. Doesn't really matter because it's all going to be changed anyway, but just keeps everything straight in my head. So I'm going to then rename this to hops, and under the foliage XML ID I'm going to add a couple zeros just to make again things much easier. You could just generate some random number there. As long as it's a number higher than any other file ID you're going to have in your i3D, it won't matter, but I just find it easier to add a couple zeros, because 25,600 is going to be way higher than anything I've got in the map already. So then what I'm going to do is look where the actual lines are in the file IDs and generate a new one or create a new one. So I'm just going to take, we've got originally our number was 256, so I'm just going to go Control F and I'll type in 256. I'm going to search backwards because I know the file IDs are above where I am at the moment, and if I click match whole word only here in Notepad++, it will look for 256 on its own and not any number that contains 256. So I'm just going to click find next, and we'll go up until we get to the file ID section, which is just here, and that takes me to the line again for the Maize. So I'm going to make a duplication of that entire line, and we'll make a new entry here, paste it in, and I'm going to change the actual part here to hops, and I'm going to take off the $data because I don't need that. And now the i3D will look in the foliage folder, and because my i3D or the foliage folder is in the same folder as my actual map i3D, it will just literally look directly there. Doesn't need to go any further, so it can be a leap straight into there and then find the actual XML and load it in. And then most importantly, I need to match the file ID here to what I set down in the foliage layers. So I'm going to add a couple of zeros on the end of there, and now that should all link in together. So we'll go ahead and save that. That's really the only thing you need to do in the map i3D itself, because everything is going to be loaded in through XMLs. So you don't need to make too many adjustments in the map i3D itself. So we're then going to open this up in the Giants editor, and this is always a real good telltale if you've messed something up, because it will give you a lot of errors. So hopefully now when I come into the console here and I look, we have no errors. Fantastic. So it's always worth looking in here first, even if you get into the map in the editor and come into the foliage layer and you have exactly what you expected. I've got my hops here, and you think, yes, that worked, fantastic. Start painting it all down on the map, and then you get it into game and it falls over and crashes. When you reload the editor back up again, you have a look and there's a list of errors as long as your arm. You've wasted a fair bit of time. So it's always worth looking in the console first for any errors, irregardless to whatever else is going on, in my opinion. So I had no errors, and I have my hops showing up in the drop down. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to find an area where I can actually paint these down. before I save anything, because once I save the map in the Giants editor, it's going to update my i3D, rejiggle everything around, and then I'll have to possibly do it all over again. And like I said, there's not much in the actual i3D in 19 that needs to be changed, but I think, in my opinion, it's always worth just checking all of your growth stages work, and then you can resave the i3D or the map here in Giants editor once you're happy with it, and that just, in my opinion, makes everything a little easier. And it's just something I've got used to doing from 17, so I'm going to stick with what I know, I guess. So I'm going to activate or turn on the terrain foliage paint mode here, and then luckily, I guess, a nice feature for the Giants editor 810, we have this drop down for our different growth stages, so we no longer have to remember what foliage channels need to be selected for each different growth stage. We can just use the drop down. So obviously invisible, there's no point in doing that one because it's not going to be visible. So we'll do green small, and we can paint that in like so, and that's our first growth stage there. Fantastic. And I think the distance textures look pretty good from that when I put together the LODs. So we'll use the green middle, and we'll go again. Not too bad. And then we can continue on green big, and then we have our final harvest stages like so, and all of those look pretty good to me. So that's okay, we can work with those. And then we have also got our withered, so that one looks pretty good as well. Again, making sure all of your distance textures are working, which they are. Fantastic. And then we have our harvested cut short. So everything there seems to be working. We've not had any crashes in the editor or whatever else, so I'm happy to go forward with that. So I'm now going to close down the editor and reopen it again. And then this is the point where I will actually save the map. So if I save the map, and we can then update the i3D, rejiggle all the parts around, and move on. So hopefully this will do what I want it to do. Still does the not responding stuff exactly the same as what it did in 17, but eventually it gets there. So we can close that down. Okay, so next thing then what we need to do is work with a few XMLs, because we need to tell the game where our fill planes are located, where our HUDs are located, our particle systems, and various other different things. So if I first of all go into the map.us XML, this is where all of our additional files are located for our material holders. So I'm going to create a few lines because I like to keep everything a little bit separate. And if I then work with, what have I got here? I've got so many different folders open. There we go, that's better. So if I then work with the fill planes, we've just got fill plane material holder. So what I'm going to do is just take the one that already exists for the Giants installation here, and then or farming simulator installation, make a copy of that one, and we'll paste that into there. I need to just change the file name. So this is going to be maps fill planes and then fill plane material holder. So I just need to change the $data to maps like so, and then our next ones are going to be in our particle systems folder. So this would be maps particle systems, and we have cutter effect maps. So I'm just going to take a copy of that one because that is actually slightly different if I recall, because we have cutter effect material holder, which is the Giant standard one. So I'm going to make a copy of that one actually first, and we'll paste that into there, and then I can make a copy of this and paste that into there. So that one's now done. Need to change the file name there, so we'll just change that to maps. And then next one is our effect material holder, which I think is the same. Yep, so we can just take the full line there, make a copy of it, paste it in, and again change the dollar data to maps. And then I think there's one more, yeah, the particle material holder. So again, I can take this one because it's named the same again. So take that one, paste it in, and change the dollar data to maps as well. Like so. I've now told the game where everything's going to be for my fill planes and particle effects and cutter effects and everything else, so that's good. So we can go ahead and save that. And then while I'm in here, I also need to look at these green, these edited out lines of text, because we have our maps fill types and our maps fruit types, and we also have our maps density height types, which is for our tip on ground stuff. So this is a little bit broken at the moment, the tip on ground, when it comes to file names, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. So I'm just going to do the fill types and fruit types to start with. So what I'm going to do is actually take that line, I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to make a few spaces there and paste it in up there so they're all linked together. We'll come back to the density map height types one later on, and I'm just going to remove all of these parts so it reactivates things again, like so. And then again, this is going to be slightly different when I bring the files in. The path file name is going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to put them into this folder here. So if I then go into the Giants installation folder itself, this may be different for you because I'm running a disk version, so mine is in my games folder. Yours may be Steam, Steam Apps, Common, and then FarmSim19. Mine's just Games and then FarmSim19. Go into the data folder here, and then if I go into Maps folder, we're going to scroll down a little bit, and here we've got fill types and fruit types, and also the density map height types, but like I said, I'm going to come back to that. So we'll do our fill types and fruit types one first. So I'm going to make a copy of both of those, and then come back to my sample mod map here, and we'll paste them into there like so. And then I need to make some edits in here. Now, from what I understand, what I've read, Giants have set things up that, irregardless to what you tell the game to look at, so in this particular case, I'm going to change this path file name here to look at my fill types and fruit types XML. But Giants have set it up that the default fill types and fruit types are loaded irregardless. They're force loaded. This is hard coded into the game. So we do not need to have all of the base game fill types and fruit types in these XMLs. Only the additional ones need to be there. There is a little bit of a caveat to that. If you're going to start messing around with HUDs and things like that, because that's an adaptation to the actual XML or change, you will need to have those in that XML for their new path file names to the HUDs that you're going to use instead of the Giants standard ones. So now that I've set this up, we'll change that to maps. So I'm just going to go maps, and then we'll change this one to maps. I could have just copied and pasted that, but never mind. Is that right? No, that's not right. I need to get rid of the maps, don't I? Because it's actually already got maps. So I just need to get rid of the dollar data there as well. So we've got maps, and then maps fill types, maps fruit types. Okay, so I can go ahead and save that. Hopefully that's right. Pretty sure it is, but we'll check that later. So again, if I work with the fill types, we'll open this one up, and we have a few different parts in here. Now there's no file type conversion required because it's not working with a header or anything like that, so I can immediately get rid of that. Don't need that. And then we have to look through our different fill types again, because I've based this around Maize. That's what I'm going to work with. So I'm going to take from the wheat down to the soybean, delete all of those, and then from the, not including the maize, so from potato down to all the way down to the bottom, and we'll highlight this one, and then we'll delete all of those. Now, like I was saying, if you're going to make adjustments to the HUD, if you're going to use different HUD files, then you would need to keep all of the ones that you're going to adjust the HUD files for. So if I wanted a new HUD for maize, a new HUD for wheat, barley, whatever, I would need to have those entries left in this XML and then just change the path file name to the HUD that I wanted to use. But I don't need to do that. I'm just going to stick with the Giants ones. Obviously for the hops, I'm going to have my own custom HUD, but that's the only one I'm going to be working with anyway, so that's fine. So I'm just going to type in there hops, and then this one here, I'm just going to change that to hops as well, like so. The other stuff there you can leave as it is, and then these ones here are going to obviously need to point to my HUDs. So we've got maps, HUDs, and then the appropriate parts there. So let's change this one, that's HUDs, and this will be maps. So maps, HUDs, fill types, is that right? Well, we've got maps, HUDs, so no fill types, so we need to take that out. So maps, HUDs, and then the actual name of the file. So we'll take a copy of that one and we'll paste that over there like so. So we've got maps, HUDs, and then the appropriate parts there. Just need to change the actual name of the file, so we'll go hops in that one, and then this one will be hops as well, so we can do like so. Okay, so that should be okay. Again, with path file names and things like that, it just tends to get a little bit, like I was saying, file names are a little bit weird. One XML will want it one way, and then another XML will want it a completely different way. So we'll try that first, and hopefully that's correct. Next thing we need to look at is our fill type categories. So for me, as I've been saying up till now, I've based this around maize, and I think that's possibly a good idea to base it around an in-game fruit type or fill type, because then it will give you a better understanding of how all of this stuff works. So for example, I would want this to be under the bulk category so I can have it in my trailers and things like that. So for this, I'm going to just basically delete all of these lines because I don't need any of that stuff. Because again, remembering we only need to add in our additional stuff, because the game will load all of the other stuff in by default. It's hard coded. This needs to be in uppercase for whatever reason, so I'm just going to put in hops. We don't need liquid, piece, or winrow, so I can basically delete all of those lines. Our combine obviously needs to be set up to harvest our hops, so we're going to include that one. Our sprayer, spreader, we don't need that. It's arguable. I don't know whether hops would be put through an auger wagon, but I'm going to include it. Why not? So we'll just put in hops in there as well. For our forage wagon, we don't want hops in our forage wagon. There's no need for that. It would be converted into chaff, so there's no reason to have that in there. And silage trailer, again, you know, that's going to be converted. The hops is going to be converted into chaff, so that's again going to be loaded in by default. So we can just basically get rid of those. I probably would want it on my train wagons, so again we can use this one, and we'll put in our hops there. Forage harvester, no. Slurry and manure, so we can basically get rid of all of those. Fork, probably not. And then obviously animal, horse, we won't want any of those either. And then the hayloft, no. So that would just be farm silo and a loading wagon. So again, I can just take a copy of that and paste that onto there like so, and I'll do the same with this one. Now it may be, yeah, it'll be up to the individual map maker, whatever else. You might not want it to have the capability to put your hops in a farm silo. You might want to have it so it's tipped on the ground in some other form. So again, it comes back to the auger wagon as well. I have no idea whether hops can be put in auger wagon. For me, it's not. I don't really, either way works. So just work through these and decide which ones you want it to be set up for, and just adjust it as required. So I'm going to keep my default sound here for the silo, because that will then link in with the hops, so it gives me my default sound there for the silo, but the manure and the liquids not required, so I can go ahead and get rid of those. And then we'll go ahead and save. So we'll save that and close that one down. So now I should have that set up. I tend to just reopen it again once I've saved it and just make sure that I have actually done it right. So I've got my hops, and that's shown price table. I could possibly adjust that, so I might make it maybe 580 or 880. Again, I don't know what price per litre of hops is, but you can change the price per litre there to your heart's content. My image files should be set up for my HUDs. Again, the mass per litre and all that sort of stuff, change that if you want to, but honestly I would just leave it as it is. And then the palette itself here is up to you if you want to include that or not, whether it can be set up in a palette, a fillable palette. I'm going to leave it, don't see why not. So again, we'll go ahead and save that. So then we look at our fruit types. Like I've said just a moment ago, we only need to include the additional crop in here. There's no need to have all of these other ones because they are hard coded and will be loaded into the game irregardless. And if you load it twice, it could possibly cause conflicts. So the game is going to force load wheat in, and then you're going to tell it to load it in again because it's looking at this XML. So that could cause you some issues. So I would just remove all of the ones you don't want, and then keep the ones that obviously keep one that you want to adjust to work with your additional crops. So I'm going to work with the maize again. So I'm going to delete all of those down to the maize, and then we'll select the potato one and come down to the bottom of the fruit type section and delete that, and then I can change this one to hops like so. I'm going to leave everything there as it is, don't need to really change any of that. Can't remember if that was uppercase or lowercase. Lowercase, okay, good. So let's just do that again. Some of these are really weird, they have to be uppercase, and yeah, when you've been doing XML editing for several hours, it all blurs in together. So now we can look at our different grain headers and maize headers and things like that. So I particularly wouldn't particularly have hops on a grain header, so I can delete that one. I'm going to go with the maize header, so we'll just type in the hops there again in uppercase. Maize cutter, so I can just copy that and paste it. Direct cutter, no, wouldn't have it on that one. Pickup, no. Sowing machine, no. Sugarcane planter, no. And then obviously my planter, because I'm basing all this around maize again, I would go with that particular seeder, not the other one. But again, that's up to you entirely which one you go to. You could use the sowing machine instead of the planter, but I prefer this one. And then our weeder, we don't need that either, so we can get rid of that. Our mower is not going to really matter. I'm not going to work with that. Don't want any kind of setup there. I wouldn't mow hops. That's not going to get me anything, so I can delete all of the file conversions there. And then we can work with our forage harvester. So I'm going to again work with the maize here, so I'll delete all of the others and just change the maize over to the hops like so, which is going to give me chaff, and you can change your conversion factor for whatever number you want there to give you more or less chaff. So all of that now should be set up correctly, and we have our link red line down here telling me that it's all joining together correctly, so that's fine. I've not made any mistakes, because sometimes I can do this quite quickly and I'll delete a tag or something and then it will cause me errors. So I always like to just click on the two start and end tags in the actual XML. If I get my nice red line joining everything together, that gives me a better chance of it working, so, or it gives me an idea that I haven't messed something up anyway. So we can close that one down. So we now have our field types and our fruit types theoretically set up. So at this point you might want to go into the map and then just test everything out, so we can do that relatively easily. So I'll just switch over a couple things and we'll have a quick look at that in game and see if we get any errors. Okay, so into game then, and there are some errors, but they're nothing to do with what I've set up. These are standard kind of errors when you create a sample mod map, because I've left the dollar data in the default items or the default vehicles XMLs, and it's giving me errors because it can't locate certain things. But that's nothing to do with the hops. That can be easily fixed by just editing the XML slightly. But I've got no other errors here to do with hops. Everything there is loading in perfectly fine, so that's a good sign. So then the next thing I would suggest is to actually make sure we have some kind of display in our escape menu here for our overview. If we come into here, you can see in the fruit types in our filters, there are the hops. We have our HUD, and we can then select and deselect that. Now you will notice possibly straight away there that the actual colour is exactly the same as the maize, because I've based it on the maize or corn. It's using the same colour texture, so if you look at the map overview, you're going to go, oh, there's corn in that map, or maize, whichever you prefer to call it, but in actual fact it's hops. So some adjustments there in the XML may be required for the actual colour that's displayed here on the overview, but at the end of the day, you've got this to work with. So you know, if you come down to corn and click it and it doesn't disappear, it's going to be hops. You know, I will show you in the XML what to change there, but if you need to, you can have a mess around with that. But it's a bit weird how they set up the RGB in Farm Sim. It's not quite the same as what it is for any other things, in my opinion. So, but we have some parts there. So let's just have a quick look. That's still growing. So is there a field with hops in that is fully grown? No, that one's still growing. But we can go over to that field, I guess, and have a quick look at it. So I'll pause here and I'll get over to the field and we'll have a look and see what it is. I may speed up time slightly just so we can have a look at how the growth stage is, or what it looks like when it's fully grown, or whatever else. Okay, so you can see we have hops is showing up in the bottom right there. It's growing, fertilized 50%. We don't actually own this field, so I can't do much about that without messing about with buying some farmland and whatever else. It may, if I speed up time, it may change over, even though it's controlled by an NPC. We'll just see. I don't want to get into the dark, but we'll just speed up time a little bit and just see if it does actually adjust. There we go. So we've gone up a growth stage, and I actually think that looks pretty good. That's not too bad at all, and it does bend about when you go over to it and whatever. So you know, all of that stuff is working pretty much as you'd think it would. So I guess that's pretty good. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to pause the video again here, and then I'll get a harvester set up. I'll purchase this land, I think, and then we'll just quickly test the harvester to make sure it gives us all the correct particle effects and fill planes and whatever else at this stage. Okay, so this come round, I've fast forwarded time so that it's now fully grown. If we have a look, ready to harvest. Not really bothered with the weeds or anything like that. Should have turned them off actually, but never mind. It's not fully fertilized, but again, you know, and everything here bends and moves about, as you can see, like it's meant to. So all of that stuff is working. So if we just get into the harvester here and I get this thing opened up and whatever else, we'll just harvest some hops now. There are some things I have had issues with hired workers when it comes to additional field types, so I'm not 100% sure if it will work with this, but we can test that out as well, I guess. So this is not really a very straight edge, but if I press H, the hired worker is clearly doing his job, so, or hers. So that does in this particular case work, and we do have all of the chopper effects coming out the back, which is really nice. Our particle effects, fill planes. We also have our header particle animations and header animations for the actual crop. if I turn that off, and we'll just go down the outside row here, and you can see all of the different LOD textures coming into effect there and whatever else. So if we just come up, this edge might show a little bit better the actual header animations. You can see there the actual crop is going into the header and then being cut down and doing all the bits and pieces. So fantastic, that's all working really, really well in my opinion. So we have got hops in the map all working, at least so far anyway, and you can see the different, where we're rubbing up the header against the other ones, they are bending out the way and moving, so all of that stuff is working fine. I've not actually had to edit or convert any GRLEs, GDMs or anything else. This is just one crop type, additional crop type. If you're adding more, there may be some potential issues until you convert certain density channels and then recreate them with the additional channels. I've not really looked into it that much, if I'm absolutely honest with you guys. This is my kind of first real attempt with additional crop types. I've done a fair bit with additional fill types, but not crop types or foliage types or fruit types, whatever you want to refer them to. So if we open up the pipe here, and I'll get the trailer up here, we'll just check that that does actually work. So I'll just zoom back to the truck and take the cover off. We'll get up to the harvester and just check that that actually does unload. Harsh daytime changing, I need to fix that. That's something that does really bug me, the way the actual light changes. It's really, really harsh in my opinion. But there we go. So we do have our unload and our fill plane and everything else there, and it is showing in our display in the bottom right there, hops with the appropriate HUD and everything else. So that side of things is working perfectly fine as far as I can tell at the moment. But if I then bring up the F1 menu, we don't have any kind of tip on ground. Now, I'm not actually sure whether belly dumps will tip on ground anyway. I don't use these very often, but I think that's possibly because the density XML for the density height types or whatever it's called hasn't been set up yet. So what I would do is just harvest a little bit more of these, because if it's going to work tip on ground wise, I should be able to do it directly from the harvester. So I'll just get a little bit more here in the harvester, and we'll just see if that will allow us to tip on ground. It shouldn't do, because like I said, that part of it hasn't been set up. So again, if I bring the pipe out, we'll bring up the F1 menu and we'll see what it says. So no tip on ground. Just out of curiosity, yeah, so straw is not available for this current fill type, or fruit type, so that's the way it should be. I just wondered, it gave me the option there in the F1 menu, but wouldn't get straw for this, I wouldn't imagine, so that's fine. And there's no tip on ground. So what we'll do then is we'll have a look at a couple of different things, the colour and how to change that for the overview here. Not going to get too much involved with that. I'm just going to show you what needs to be changed, and you can have a play of that to your heart's content and see what colours you can come up with for your different additional crop types. And then we'll also look at the fruit type density, or whatever it is, height map thingy, XML, and we'll have a quick look at that and get the tip on ground function sort of working. Now, I've read that this is going to be fixed in 1.3. Whenever that's going to be full release, I have no idea. So for the time being, it's a little bit quirky. You might want to avoid it if you're going to share the map with anybody else. They will have issues because the file name will not match what they will have on their system to what you've got on yours. It's a bit weird how it's set up at the moment, but like I say, it will be fixed from what I've read on the Giants Developer Network in version 1.3. So we'll just have a quick look at a couple of other things, and then hopefully we can finish up the video. So we'll get back on the desktop. Okay, so going to go back into the maps folder here for the sample mod map of Ravenport, and I'm going to go back into the installation folder for my game, not that folder though. In my D drive, games, FS19. Again, if you're on Steam it'll be different, or you may have a disk version and you've installed it somewhere else other than what I've got, so just, you know, wherever you've got your FS19 installed. And we're going to go back into the maps folder here, and then I'm going to look for the density map height type XML. I'm going to make a copy of that one, and we'll then put that into the sample mod map here. And then I need to change where the map XML is going to look for that. So we'll open this one up again and then come into here. I'm going to cut that, make a new line, and then we'll paste that into there like so. And then again I'm going to need to remove all of these parts to make it active again. And I can just remove the $data from there, so it looks in my maps folder and then this XML. So we can go ahead and save that, close that down, and if I open this one up you can see we have all of the crop types in here again, or the fill planes or whatever it's going to be. I guess this would be based off of fill planes. Yeah, fill planes. So coming back to what I said earlier on, the game force loads the defaults, so we don't need all of these to be in here, only the one that we're going to be adding in additionally. So as I've been doing so far, I'm going to base this around the Maize again. So we'll come down to where the Maize is and we'll delete all of those, and then anything below that we'll delete. So we'll just do like so and then get rid of those. Now I'm going to change this one over to hops like so. And then I just need to point this to where my fill planes folder is and the appropriate channels. So if I come into here, I've got fill planes and then the actual hops diffuse, the hops normal, and my hops distance diffuse. So this is just going to be maps fill planes, and then hops diffuse, and maps fill planes, hops normal, and maps fill planes, hops distance diffuse. Or at least you would think that's what it's meant to be, but it isn't. Because for some reason this doesn't locate the file if you use this setup. It needs to be specific to where exactly it is installed. So what I need to do here is actually find where this would be in my actual mod folder. So what I need to do is actually put that into my mod folder first of all. So if I go into here, mods, and then drag that into there like so, what I'm going to do is actually change this slightly because I don't want it to be quite as long as that. So we'll just change that to map 2. There we go, that'll be fine. And then what I need to do is actually tell this XML exactly where that's going to be. So it would be, for me, I've got my C drive, which is where my documents folder is located. So I would need to go C, users, my, and then it would be my documents, and then my games, Farming Sim 19, mods, map 2, maps, fill planes. So that's the problem at the moment, because it's not quite, the XML can't look in the right place, or what you would think it would look in the right place by these base kind of file names. This again, like I said, has been fixed, or is meant to be fixed in 1.3, but at the moment it's a bit broken. So if you set up your tip on ground for your computer, that will not be potentially the same as somebody else's, because again, if this is installed through a computer that's got a name of John or something or whatever else, then obviously that's not going to work. So, because it's going to look in the wrong place. So if you've got your documents folder on a completely different drive than the C drive, then again that's not going to work. So this is not really appropriate to set up at the moment. So it's a bit weird. But if we actually go back to where we were, so for me I'm going to just type this in if I can. So if I just try and do this. So if I make that a bit wider, there we go. So this is going to be, I think, for me, C:/users /my, and then it would be my documents. So if I just take a copy of that, put that into there, / and then it would be my games. So if I just take a copy of that one, put that into there, FS19, so we'll take that, put that into there, and then mods, and then the name of the map. So we've just got map_2, so we'll just take a copy of that, put that into there, / and then maps, fill planes, and so on and so on. So if I take a copy of all of that and put that into there, and then do the same with that one. So this should theoretically be what my file name needs to be for those particular files, those particular texture files. And like I said, that's a bit broken at the moment, because that's definitely not going to work for everybody else's PC. So if I was to upload this to a share site or something, and then it was downloaded by another player, they would have to come into here and adjust this for their own PC, which would be fine if you plan to play the game in single player. But if you're going to put this on a server, it's just not going to work. It's just going to fall over. Not going to know what the hell's going on. So like I say, that's a little bit weird at the moment, and cannot be saved. Oh, okay, fine. So yeah, that's a little bit weird at the moment, and needs to be played around with by giants. So I think what we'll do then, I've saved that now, so it's because I moved my folders around to various places and renamed things. Notepad++ freaked out, so I've just redone that. And yeah, actually what I will do is really quickly, we'll have a look at the other one. I think that might be in fruit types. Yeah, so your map colors are set here depending on what you want to set it up as. So your default is going to be your RGBA. The 1 is the alpha, so that will always stay 1, but these ones here will be slightly different, so you can have a bit of a play around with those numbers there to get some sort of different color that will be showing up in your overview in the escape menu. And then also, if you're going to work with the colorblind mode, you can adjust those as well. But again, the 1 would always stay 1 because it's your alpha. So it works on an RGBA, so red, green, blue, alpha. I'm not going to really mess about with those in the video here, but you can certainly come in and mess about with that in the XML, and just either do a search on Google or something like that for RGB bright green or whatever else. The only thing I would say is there's some issue with the way, or some differences the way it will be displayed in an RGB color palette to what it will be set up by giants, because it's always if you get a number of, let's say 256, you won't put 256 in here, it will be 0.0256, if that makes sense, like you've got here for the 262. So if you looked up the RGB for whatever that was, so that would be red, green, blue, it would probably, if it gave you in your RGB color palette, whatever the intensity of blue is, it would just give you 262, but in the actual XML it would need to be 0.0262. You can't just put 262 in because it will freak out and it won't understand what you're asking of it. So just be a little bit careful when you look up RGB colors. They will not quite match the way it's set up for Giant's color palettes. So yeah, just have a bit of a play around with the numbers there. You can just, don't need to really mess about too much looking up different colors and that. Just change one of these. So you might want to change the 8 to a 7 or something, and the 3 to a 4, and just see what it gives you and have a bit of a play around there. But that's basically how you would change that if you wanted to. Okay, so I think then, now that I've set up the density map, height types and all that sort of stuff, what I'll do is I'll just pop back in the game and we'll see if that works. Okay, so I did a start a new game save because I changed the names of the folders and things like that. It got upset with me, so that's fine, no worries. So we'll just harvest a small amount of the hops again here just to make sure everything's working. Again, we have all of our particle effects, chopper effects, fill planes, all of that good stuff. So all of that is now working, or still working I should say, thankfully. All of the header animations, all the other stuff, all of that's working really, really well, so fantastic. Smoke coming off the header. I do like to include all of those parts. I think it just adds to the immersion when you've got all of these different chopper particles and whatever else coming off the combine. Otherwise, if you don't include that, it just, I don't know, to me it just looks a bit meh. But that should be enough, because we're just going to test the tip on ground function here anyway. So if I switch the harvester off, I will actually just get onto some levelish ground, because I didn't realise there's actually quite a dip there. So we'll just come over to here and tip it out onto the road if it works, which I'm hoping it will. So if I then put the pipe out, we'll bring up the F1 menu here, and I should get, interesting, not getting a tip on ground. You don't have access to this land. Of course I don't. Okay, so let's buy it then. So let's buy that. Yeah, and then we have our tip on ground. Still getting used to the farmland stuff and having to purchase individual land and all that sort of stuff. But we now do have the unload here function, which we did not have before. So if I press Control I, we have our heap of hops on the ground, like so. So yeah, there's a couple of different things obviously that need to be tweaked here and there with the LOD files for your foliage, the way that the XMLs are now what controls everything. There's no requirements to put parts into the i3D other than the file ID section and the foliage section and all that sort of stuff, and link all that together, and everything else is just individual i3Ds loading all your parts together via XMLs. This part, the tip on ground function stuff with the density height map, really hoping that all of that is now working. I've been told, or I've read, that it is working in version 1.3. I am still running version 1.2 because I'm on the disk version. There is a 1.3 beta available for people running versions other than the Steam version, but for me I would have to practically uninstall the game and reinstall it again if I wanted to revert back to 1.2. For Steam users it's much easier, just take a tick out of the box and it does it all for you. But irregardless, I don't want to start messing around switching backwards and forwards from one to the other. I'm quite happy to just wait until version 1.3 goes live. But hopefully what I've shown you in the video tutorial here will give you a guide or a bit of a direction to go in when it comes to adding different crop types. And it's just really I guess making sure that you set up all your XMLs correctly and the file names and all those different things. The creation of the different foliage LOD textures is going to be a little bit more of a ball ache, but if you can get your head around that side of things, just cutting and pasting, you know, cropping out certain areas of the diffuse, the main diffuse for the foliage texture, and then creating your own LODs for the different growth stages. You can, again, like I've done with this particular scenario, cheat and use normals from a crop type that gives you, you know, a similar kind of effect to the crop that you're going to be working with. So if I was going to bring in something maybe like tobacco or something like that, I might use the normals from canola, or something along those lines. You know, just match it into something that looks close enough that will work. And to be fair, I really don't think this looks too bad. You know, as you get farther and farther away, it's still giving you a good idea of that is hops and that is maize. You know, so I would still know from a distance that I was working with hops. And at the end of the day, it's just a distance texture. That's the whole idea of this, in my opinion. You have this to tell you exactly what crop is where, if you're not sure. I'm ShyWizard. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.